Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 120 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight we're going to try not to lose our clothes.
Well, if we do, we certainly won't be running naked on the grass.
Oh, no, we will not.
And I am sorry to everyone for that image. But folks, we will head on over to the common room. Shirts and shoes required, okay?
Absolutely.
This is, no service without kind of place.
Strict dress code here.
We'll be there in just a few moments. But first, I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, who tells me he no longer feels limp like helpless prey, Alan Sisto.
Hey, watch it, man. I might have to hew your crawling arm off.
Well, you're likely to break your sword in the process. Is that really worth it?
Okay, well, maybe.
I mean, I suppose you could probably find another one hanging around here somewhere.
There are a few, I'm sure.
Speaking of things and people, in this case, who hang around, we found a... You like that segue?
Oh, I do. Well, not really, no.
No, it was terrible.
Now that you ask.
We found a good friend of ours hanging around the halls of the Prancing Pony, and you know what that means, folks.
Well, today we're bringing you another new installment of The North Wing.
Barlam and Butterbur had a room or two in the North Wing at the Prancing Pony Inn, made special for hobbits. And this is our place, made special for some of our listeners, to give us a chance to get to know them.
That's right. Now, rooms at the North Wing are a little hard to come by these days, so only our patrons at the Elrond's Honorarium and Círdan's contribution tiers are eligible. So if you'd like to be one of the next patrons to join us, be sure to check out patreon.com/prancingponypod.
Please do. We've got a waiting list right now for the North Wing, but we will get to all of those folks soon, and we'll make room for more if necessary.
That's right. Season 4. I mean, we're going to be around for a few years, folks, so there's definitely time.
That's the plan.
In the meantime, why don't we go ahead and welcome tonight's guest to the North Wing, Ed Powell. Ed?
Hey.
Hey.
Good to talk to you again, Ed.
Nice to see you guys again.
Yeah, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
For those who don't know, we actually just saw Ed very recently at TexMoot. So it really is, hey, we're just chatting again. So
it's just hey again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we go ahead and start with a little getting to know you question for our listeners who don't know you as well as we do. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What do you do? What do your loved ones think of all this Tolkien stuff that you are very, very into? Do they think you're a total nerd? Do they like it? That sort of thing.
Where am I from? I'm from outside Philadelphia, so I was rooting for last year's Super Bowl. Where do I live now is in Northern Virginia, and I'm married, and you met Sharon the other day. And what do my relatives think about the Tolkien thing? I think my dad got me into Tolkien, so he thought it was interesting, and my sisters read The Lord of the Rings at least more than I have, so she thinks it's pretty cool. And some of my friends are just as nerdy, so I think they're down with it.
Yeah, you run in good circles, it sounds like.
This community does that to people, doesn't it? You make friends with people who are like you.
Yeah.
We're certainly a nerd convention, that's for sure.
Yeah.
A rolling nerd convention, absolutely. Well, Ed, you gave us a really awesome introduction to our keynote at TexMoot, and of course we want to thank you for that. And in that, you alluded to something that we knew about you, but that our listeners may not. You've actually been involved with Signum University for a long time. In fact, you're on the board of directors. Can you tell our listeners the story of how you got involved with Corey and his team?
Yeah, okay. I mean, like I said the other day, I was paying a workman who had come and done some work, and he saw that I had Sting on the wall of my office, and he said, have you ever heard of the
sword, not the musician?
No, yes, not the musician.
Only if he was wearing his costume from Dune. Do you want him hanging on your wall?
Fade. Yeah, no.
Fade Routha.
I saw Sting last summer at a free concert. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I like the sharp, shiny one better, but
it
was all right.
He didn't glow blue around the edges, though?
No.
Yeah,
so he said to me...
I'm sorry. Delayed reaction.
That was really delayed.
He said, have you ever heard of the Tolkien Professor podcast? And this was about 10 years ago. And my response was, what's a podcast?
Yeah.
So I was like, I had to have to Google this. And so I started out, and then he had this Mythmoot one, and Sharon and I went, and we had a good time and met him and met all the other nerds. And I don't know, we started taking auditing classes, not actually taking for credit, because I've taken my last class for credit in my life. And,
congratulations.
And then I don't know. I think Corey had a particularly bad medicine that he was using or something, but he asked me to be on the board of directors. I think it was probably pain medication that he had too much of, and thought, well, maybe this Ed guy.
You slipped something in his drink, huh?
Yeah,
Right.
It might be. He might be appropriate.
To make him, make him suggestible.
I do have a PhD, and that does look good to, potential other people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that would.
That makes sense.
I think that's the kind of reason. Nothing relevant though. So, so then I was on the board, and we basically do the legal oversight for the corporation, which is Signum University, and make sure that everything's on the up and up. And
right.
mostly it's like every other thing with Corey. We just listen to Corey talk for 2 hours.
That's great. Well, so you've been around since the very beginning, Myth Moot 1.
Yes. I've been to all of them. Sharon missed number 2, but she's been to all the other ones.
My goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been fun. I made a lot of good friends. It's all a great crowd. And of course, I found out last summer that these Prancing Pony guys were on the agenda for Myth Moot 5. And I'm like, I want to listen to some of their podcasts. So I went back and said, and look at the podcast. I'm like, there's like 75 of these, and they start at the very beginning. I'm not going to do that. That's crazy. I'll just listen to a couple of the interviews. So I did listen to the interviews. And then of course I met you guys and found out that you were great fellows. And I thought, well, no, I am going to take the plunge, and I'm going to start back with episode 1. And I did. And I'm now caught up. It's been
quite an accomplishment.
It's been great. Yeah, I know it's been great. You guys are different. Corey's approach to the text is very much close reading, or as I said the other day, read the words, which
it's a good approach.
It is.
As a science student, that was amazing. Nobody had ever told me that before, that the way you approach literature is to read the actual words on the page. That was shocking to me. And it's like, oh, wow, you get much more out of it when you read the words.
Yeah, you do.
So, but you guys bring in a lot more material from other places, whether it's the history of Middle-earth or some of the scholarship around it, that you kind of build a picture around each segment. And I think that's and also a very interesting and worthwhile take on the text. And I really do appreciate all of the work you guys have put into doing this podcast, because it's really excellent.
Well, thanks, Ed.
Well, thank you very much, Ed. Thank you very much. And we're thrilled that we've met you. It's been great getting to know you, and we're just really happy to have you in our corner.
Yep. I'm here.
Well, and we appreciate it. Well,
like
I'm going to go ahead and move
Meredith and Rocky,
Yeah, I was going to say you're our cut man. Huh?
Exactly. And we need one. But I'm going to move on to the question we ask everybody who comes to the Prancing Pony. I think you actually answered this one a moment ago. When and how did you first discover Tolkien's works? What was your experience like, and why do you keep coming back?
Well, I was 14 years old, and my dad got the books lent to him by a colleague at work who thought he might like them. And he read The Hobbit. And when he started the Lord of the Rings, he handed me The Hobbit and said, you would probably like this. And so I read it, I consumed it. And then I started reading the Lord of the Rings. And of course, mostly when he was at work, this was over the summer. And I finished before he did, because I just consumed it during the day while he was at work. And
I miss summer reading. I really do.
Then I gave it to my sister.
Oh, wow. Right on.
And she was like, I don't want to read this. This is stupid. And but we got really bored one day on a very long car trip. So she started it on The Hobbit. And, like most brothers with younger sisters, the point of car trips is to torture your younger sister during the day.
Absolutely.
But as soon as she picked up The Hobbit, I was like, okay, I'm going to be quiet, and I'm going to sit on my side of the car for the rest of the trip, just so that she can read it,
Right on.
That's cool.
And she did, and she got hooked. So just as hooked as I was. So that was my origin story. Then I read of the Silmarillion immediately following the Lord of the Rings, and from front to back, and I'm like, okay, this is different, but I got it.
Yeah, that's a way to put it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't one of those who threw it away or came back to it later. I motored right through, and then I read the Unfinished Tales which my parents bought me the first American edition when it was published. And and I've gotten through most of the history of Middle Earth. I think I have 2 volumes left to do in that.
Are you going sequentially through that?
I did read them sequentially, and then I've been rereading them as Corey's gone through them in the Mythgard Academy series.
Yeah. Cool.
So which one is your favorite book in the Legendarium and why? And then which one is your favorite non-Legendarium work, if you have one?
We're all boring. It's the Lord of the Rings, and I think it's because it has everything in it, and it is a long tale, but not as long as, say, George R.R. Martin, and it does have. I will tell you a story. I was in the bookstore. It's about a year and a half ago, and we still have bookstores. And so I was looking in the science fiction fantasy section, of course, and I looked, and there's a new edition of The Lord of the Rings I hadn't seen. And so I picked it up. It's a 1-book edition, and leafed through and started reading on a page. And I got goosebumps because the language was so beautiful. I've read it a billion times, and I'm like, wow, if a book can do that, just picking up and reading on a random page after so many times, then it's something special.
Boy, you're not kidding.
And as far as the non-Legendarium stuff, I do have a soft spot in my heart for Leaf by Niggle.
Yeah.
Because I have a tendency to do that. I have a tendency to go deep into things and thus never finish them. So that I see that in myself as well. So that's kind of my favorite non-Legendarium work.
Excellent.
Well, Ed, I know you're a cat guy, and it's always a pleasure to have another one of us around.
Awesome.
Have you ever given a pet a name inspired by Tolkien?
No, I haven't. Our 2 cats, which we just lost last summer, were Alexander and Aristotle, because we were into classical history, Sharon and I, and the real life Aristotle was the tutor of the real life Alexander.
Right. Yeah.
So our Aristotle was the smart one, and our Alexander was the one who wanted to go
wanted to conquer the world,
conquer the Persians specifically, because how Persian cats are. They think they're the queen of everything. But no, we did not give any pets any Lord of the Rings or Tolkien related names. But I think there may be cats in our future, and we'll have to review that. I routinely get suggestions from people of what we're going to name the new cats, and the new cats probably haven't even been conceived yet. But when we do get around to it, we might think of that.
Yeah. Speaking of the classical cat names, I had a ragdoll cat named Claudia. That was mine. She passed away a couple of years ago, and she was named after the Roman Emperor Claudius. So,
cool.
Right there with you on that. But well, very good. You're going to have to keep us posted when you get those cats.
Please do.
Believe me, if I get the cats, Facebook will be nothing but cat.
The world
pictures.
will know. Yeah, exactly. There's a little button that might have to say something like "See less from Ed."
Yeah,
for 30 days.
Not me, man. Keep it coming.
No, I'm kidding.
Send all your cat pics to me.
There you go. Well, we're going to go ahead and move on to the lightning round. These are we're terrible at lightning round, but we're going to try. How's that?
Yeah, I'm terrible at oral exams. Just awful.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to start out. Who's your favorite elf from the first age?
Okay, I'm going to give you 2, and you're not going to like one. Fëanor and Luthien.
Okay.
and I'll give you the 2-sentence about Fëanor. He moved the plot forward. He did things. He didn't just sit around and have festivals. He moved things. He was the key actor. He was an actor. He acted. He did stuff. And same with Luthien. So I like that, even though he's obviously a bad guy in a lot of respects.
Fair enough.
I can respect that.
Yeah.
What's the one place in Middle Earth you wish you could visit?
Wow, there's so many. There's the classical Hobbiton, Rivendell, Edoras, Minas Tirith. But I guess if I'm going to be honest, I'd probably like to see the Grey Havens.
Nice.
That would be beautiful. Do you consider yourself a Merry or a Pippin?
I'm more of a Pippin.
Okay.
As you can probably tell.
Well, it wasn't an answer for me to give.
One does not simply walk into Mordor, but if you could, who would you rather have at your side, Aragorn or Glorfindel?
Ooh, wow. That's an excellent question. I think I'm going to have to go with Aragorn because he's been there before.
There you go. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Favorite poem or song in the Legendarium?
I'm so conventional, and I do apologize, but The Road Goes Ever On and On.
There you go.
Hey, can't argue with that one. It's a classic.
Absolutely. Well, those are great answers, Ed. Thank you. You know, we really have enjoyed having you here in the North Wing, but I think it's time for all of us to head back to the common room to join the rest of the listeners.
Thanks again, Ed, and we will see you back here at our next Questions After Nightfall, if not sooner.
See you guys.
And now we return you to the podcast in progress.
We had a great time talking to Ed, and I hope you all enjoyed hearing from him. We've got a few more reservations lined up for the North Wing, folks, so stay tuned for more.
Absolutely. Now, before we move on to our chapter discussion tonight, we want to take a minute to thank listener Jordan Ellis Rennells for sponsoring this week's episode.
Jordan is a musician, composer, and music teacher, and Tolkien reader. Just as we've spent a lot of time exploring and analyzing the themes of Tolkien's works, Jordan has invested time in understanding the way Howard Shore composed the scores for the Lord of the Rings films.
Mm-hmm. And he's looking to take on new music students, well, from anywhere in the world, for piano, drums, guitar, or any other fretted instrument, for Skype-based lessons. And he's also looking for folks who are interested in studying music composition.
And Jordan has spent years devising his own methods and explanations in music theory and relates the technical concepts back to real life and human emotions.
Mm-hmm. So if you play an instrument, or if you're interested in studying music composition with an experienced composer and music teacher, or if you need some sound design and scoring done for a project of your own, be sure to visit www.learntolisten.net.
And please be sure to let him know you heard about him here on the Prancing Pony podcast when you reach out. That's www.learntolisten.net for Skype-based music lessons or to study music composition with Jordan Ellis Rennells. And we'll be sure to put a link to his site in our show notes and social media posts.
Mm-hmm. And thanks, Jordan. Now, let's get back into the Barrow-downs and see just how strong Tom's song is today.
All right.
I'm going to go ahead and pick up where we left off last week, right after Frodo had been captured by the Barrow-wight. That would be the Barrow-wight, not the Barry-wight.
Not the Barry-wight.
Frodo. Yeah, you're looking good, Frodo, baby. All right. When he came to himself again, for a moment he could recall nothing except a sense of dread. Then, suddenly he knew that he was imprisoned, caught hopelessly. He was in a barrow. A Barrow-wight had taken him, and he was probably already under the dreadful spells of the Barrow-wights, about which whispered tales spoke. He dared not move, but lay as he found himself, flat on his back upon a cold stone, with his hands on his breast. But though his fear was so great that it seemed to be part of the very darkness that was round him, he found himself, as he lay, thinking about Bilbo Baggins and his stories, of their jogging along together in the lanes of the Shire, and talking about roads and adventures. There is a seed of courage hidden, often deeply, it is true, in the heart of the fattest and most timid hobbit, waiting for some final and desperate danger to make it grow. Frodo was neither very fat nor very timid. Indeed, though he did not know it, Bilbo and Gandalf had thought him the best hobbit in the Shire. He thought he had come to the end of his adventure, and a terrible end, but the thought hardened him. He found himself stiffening, as if for a final spring. He no longer felt limp like a helpless prey.
Pretty amazing transformation that you see there in that passage, and I really like the way you read that.
Oh, well, thank you, sir. I didn't even think about it from that perspective. But yeah, the fear, sort of this roller coaster of emotions, the fear that's so great, it's palpable, it's tangible.
Yeah.
And then it just transitions into these wonderful thoughts and memories. And how that is what helps this seed of courage to grow even in the midst of these challenging circumstances. I love it. It really, honestly, it reminds me of a bit from the prologue. There's a line that actually I want to read real briefly. It says that, nonetheless, ease and peace had left this people still curiously tough. They were, if it came to it, difficult to daunt or to kill. They were doughty at bay. And that just means brave or persistent.
Right. Yeah. And you really see how Frodo sort of embodies that here in this scene.
Oh, absolutely.
A hobbit pushed to an extreme situation, and they come through. They manage to find that courage, and
pretty quickly at that, really.
Pretty quickly, yeah, you're right.
Pretty impressive.
You're right.
So yeah, I was noticing that one of our themes popped back up, and that's the hope and despair concept. The contrast between hope and despair is the word I'm looking for. And this really is that. We have this despairing moment that the fear is part of the darkness around him. And then we have it also showing up in what might have been in the very end of that reading when he no longer felt limp like a helpless prey. That's despair. If he were to still feel that way, he clearly would be, controlled by that despair. And instead, we have real, genuine hope.
He finds true hope. Absolutely. Yeah.
Even if it's hope to just face his end, right? I mean, he thinks he's at the end, but that thought of being at his end hardens him. It brings him hope. This is one of those backs to the wall moments that we talked about in Beowulf.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I noticed something as you were reading it just now, that both the hope and the despair are linked to stories.
Yes, they are, aren't they?
Frodo feels despair because he's heard about the spells of the Barrow-wights in these whispered tales, and he fears he's already under a spell. That's why he's in despair. He feels like it's too late to do anything.
Yeah.
But then he gains hope by thinking about Bilbo and his stories. And the difference between despair and hope is basically the difference between a horror story that ends in tragedy and an adventure story that ends, well, he doesn't know it yet, but it's going to end with a huge catastrophe.
That's true. Yes, it will. And, we even get a mention of the actual word hopelessly, which we don't normally get. But earlier, he knew that he was imprisoned, caught hopelessly.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
So, there is a literal sense of no more hope.
Yep.
But even in that circumstance, he still finds that courage. It's really wonderful.
That's a very good catch.
I also thought Frodo's high standing in the eyes of Bilbo and Gandalf was interesting, wasn't it?
That's really neat. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was they thought him the best hobbit in the Shire.
That says a lot. I think it's easy for us sometimes to either sit in judgment of Frodo and kind of, ticky-tack, pick apart, Monday morning quarterback every one of his decisions as though he's, making some sort of mistakes.
I don't feel like we do that much.
No. But it's easy to do that. I think sometimes that happens. It's a trap to fall into.
Yeah.
But it's,
he's the main character. And so you spend a lot of time, he spends a lot of time driving events in the story. So yeah,
yes,
I guess I suppose you can do a little bit about a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
But Frodo is truly an exceptional hobbit, and you really see that here.
You do. I mean,
he's not fat or timid. He's the best hobbit in the Shire.
No, this isn't Fatty Bulger, who I don't think would react quite the same way.
Probably not.
And I think it's interesting. It's not just Bilbo that thought him the finest, the best hobbit in the Shire, but it was Gandalf. And
Gandalf too. Yeah.
That speaks a little bit more. Yeah, it really does. Good stuff.
Yeah.
As if for a final spring, he's ready. He's ready to fight to the last breath. He's not going to go down without a fight.
Back against the wall is a good call out. I mean, that's that very Anglo-Saxon. Going to do what I have to do. I'm going to die, but I'm going to do something before I do.
That's absolutely
right.
Go
down fighting.
Yeah. Courage, resolve. It's strength in the face of death. There's no giving in to that despair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then, even though we're not going to read this next paragraph, we start to see that the light starts to show up and he sees the others. Interesting. The light seems to be coming from himself. Is that an interesting thing?
That is very interesting. This pale greenish light, this makes me think of Peter Jackson.
You're right.
All
the undead stuff.
All the undead stuff had that pale green light.
Yeah.
And, I mean, like the Dead Men of Dunharrow and Minas Morgul. I still think he would have done such a good job with this scene.
Oh, I know. This would have been an amazing scene. Totally creepy, totally scary. Yeah.
I just really wish he would have done it.
Well, you couldn't have done it without Tom. And like we said
true.
earlier, a few episodes back, from a film perspective, from that cinematic perspective, Tom just doesn't move the story forward enough.
Right, exactly. And I think that's ultimately why he didn't do it. I bet he would have loved to do this scene.
Oh, I'm
because
sure.
It is so scary.
It's right in his wheelhouse. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, the crawling arm we'll see in a little bit here. I mean, that's that would have been so
That's
cool
vintage
to do.
Peter Jackson right there.
Exactly. But, going back to the light, it does make me think of the way he depicted Minas Morgul, and the way Tolkien described Minas Morgul was having a corpse light, a light that illuminated nothing. I feel like there's a little bit of that here, in sort of this light that's coming from Frodo and doesn't go far enough to really illuminate anything. It doesn't go all the way to the roof or the wall. He just sees, he can see himself, and he can just see, his
He
friends.
can just barely see his
close
friends,
to him.
but yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
And what does he see? Of course, he sees them clad in white. They're just lying there on their backs with all this treasure around them, the circlets and gold chains and all sorts of stuff. Swords and shields at their feet, but one long naked sword all the way across the three of them, three of their necks.
Man.
Yeah.
That is just so creepy.
We're going to talk more about this, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Why they're decked out like this. Yeah.
We're going to wait until we get to a later point in this episode, I think, right? When we talk a little bit more about who was originally here.
Who's here, and exactly.
Yeah. Okay, good. I want to make sure that we would touch on it, but I didn't want to spoil that yet.
Yeah.
I'm going to have you, though, pick up right after that, the arrival of the Wight himself.
All right. Suddenly, a song began, a cold murmur rising and falling. The voice seemed far away and immeasurably dreary, sometimes high in the air and thin, sometimes like a low moan from the ground. Out of the formless stream of sad but horrible sounds, strings of words would now and again shape themselves. Grim, hard, cold words, heartless and miserable. The night was railing against the morning of which it was bereaved, and the cold was cursing the warmth for which it hungered. Frodo was chilled to the marrow. After a while, the song became clearer, and with dread in his heart he perceived that it had changed into an incantation.
Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone, never more to wake on stony bed, never till the sun fails and the moon is dead. In the black wind the stars shall die, and still on gold here let them lie, till the dark Lord lifts his hand over dead sea and withered land.
He heard behind his head a creaking and scraping sound. Raising himself on one arm, he looked, and saw now in the pale light that they were in a kind of passage, which behind them turned a corner. Round the corner, a long arm was groping, walking on its fingers towards Sam, who was lying nearest, and towards the hilt of the sword that lay upon him.
This is just terrifying.
Is right.
Oh my goodness.
Man.
The groping arm walking on its fingers.
That's so... Ugh.
God.
It's amazing, though. Just
it is
brilliant. As a little bit of a fan of horror movies, and I don't read much horror fiction anymore, but I used to when I was younger. Man, this is just this is as scary as it gets.
It's right up there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. Before we dig into that, or even before we dig into the song itself, there was a sentence right before that I thought was really, really telling, and also beautifully written. The night was railing against the morning of which it was bereaved, and the cold was cursing the warmth for which it hungered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a lot there.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. I mean, these are words of, what I see here, these are just words of emptiness and hate, bereaved and hungered and cursing.
Yeah.
That's what I see here is just so much hate and anger and just emptiness.
And loss, right. And, we'd even gotten a hint of that, the line before, when we hear that the sound, the stream of words is sad but horrible. There's ever so slightly this sorrow that's present.
Yeah.
And it's what drives the anger. And so, of course, that sorrow, that absence, the things that it misses, the bereavement for the morning and the hunger for the warmth leads to the railing and the cursing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, man, no wonder Frodo's chilled to the marrow. I'm chilled.
Yeah, I'm chilled. Yeah, and I'm looking at these words on a page.
And not in a barrow. Yeah,
right.
I'm just in a sound booth, thankfully,
right.
not in a barrow. The incantation itself, though, That was intriguing. Now, I have to say, Hammond and Scull reference a very similar verse. It's actually an orc oath of all things from the Lay of Lathian that's well worth reading. And I'm going to go ahead and take that.
Okay.
Death to light, to law, to love. Cursed be moon and stars above. May darkness everlasting old that waits outside in surges cold drown Manwë, Varda, and the sun. May all in hatred be begun, and all in evil ended be in the moaning of the endless sea.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
orcs
there's a
can
lot.
rhyme.
There's a lot there that
Oh, yeah.
they can rhyme. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. There is a lot there, and there's a lot of similarity because in both of these, this is a very dark future envisioned by both songs. This cold, dead world ruled by the Dark Lord. It's
and I have some more thoughts on that I want to talk about in a moment. But you're absolutely right. They're both foreshadowing this, like you said, a dead world ruled over by the Dark Lord.
Oh, just total darkness in both cases. The sun fails, the moon is dead. Here we've got cursed be moon and stars above. Manwë, Varda, and the sun are going to be drowned. So the sun's also gone too. And just
begun in hatred, ended in evil. Yeah.
Yeah. Just that same darkness, that same all-absorbing evil. Yeah.
Yep.
Goodness.
All-consuming.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So the long arm, that just is the creepiest moment ever, isn't it? I mean,
truly.
Yeah.
Truly is, yeah.
Walking it's certainly on the scariest fingers. Thing we've seen. Yeah. Who's that? Not Cousin It, right? Who's
the Thing, right? Not the Thing, or just Thing, right?
Cousin It was the dude with the
hairy one.
Yeah.
But yeah, Thing was the one with the hand. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Disembodied hand.
Yeah.
I was reading someplace somebody saying that this wasn't necessarily a disembodied hand, but I think there's a phrase we're going to see in the next episode at the end of the chapter that suggests it really is disembodied.
That's I know what you're saying, because it doesn't say that
it doesn't specifically say that the long arm not attached to a shoulder was groping, but if it's attached to a shoulder, what the heck is it walking on its fingers for?
Right. And when we see what happens to it later, it doesn't really appear to be attached to anything. No, I see it as a disembodied arm also.
I do as well. So before we move on, is there anything else you want to touch on? I know you mentioned going back to the incantation a little bit.
No, let's leave that there for now. I'm going to come back to it in just a moment.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to go ahead and pick up exactly where you left off. This is sort of the temptation of Frodo and his wonderful response. At first, Frodo felt as if he had indeed been turned into stone by the incantation. Then a wild thought of escape came to him. He wondered if he put on the ring whether the Barrow-wight would miss him, and he might find some way out. He thought of himself running free over the grass, grieving for Merry and Sam and Pippin, but free and alive himself. Gandalf would admit that there had been nothing else he could do. But the courage that had been awakened in him was now too strong. He could not leave his friend so easily. He wavered, groping in his pocket, and then fought with himself again, and as he did so, the arm crept nearer. Suddenly, resolve hardened in him, and he seized a short sword that lay beside him, and kneeling, he stooped low over the bodies of his companions. With what strength he had, he hewed at the crawling arm near the wrist, and the hand broke off. But at the same moment, the sword splintered up to the hilt. There was a shriek, and the light vanished. In the dark, there was a snarling noise. Yeah, go Frodo!
I know, that's a victory. That's a little victory, but
that's a
big victory. Really,
it's really a big victory. Absolutely. I mean, because it's not just a victory over despair and hopelessness, like we talked about. It's a victory over the ring, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It is.
It's really his first victory over the ring, because when he almost put it on before, he wasn't saved because he was able to fight the temptation. He was saved because the Black Rider took off.
Right.
Here, he is truly in a situation where everything in his being is telling him to put on this ring and get out.
Right.
Every bit of instinct is survival mode. But he does not go that way. He fights that desire, fights with himself, and he's victorious. It's a beautiful thing.
Fights with himself and with the ring, as you said, because, this isn't just a this isn't just a self-preservation instinct
No.
that's going haywire
this is
here.
the
I mean,
ring. Yeah.
he is terrified, and he probably does. He would love to escape with his life if he could.
Who wouldn't?
Yeah, exactly. But the thought of the ring, the fact that he thinks about putting on the ring, I think that tells us that this is the ring at work. I mean, it wants to get out of there. It doesn't want to end up in this barrow, in this hoard for centuries,
Exactly.
I think this is really awesome. And this is why Frodo is the best hobbit in the Shire, according to Bilbo and Gandalf.
Absolutely. And in a way, we look forward to Gandalf's comment about this being the most dangerous moment. When he's recovering in Rivendell, I think Gandalf's talking about this as the highlight, if you will, the most touch and go moment, I believe he says, is something about, it was really touch and go. This was crucial. He puts on that ring. The story might be at an end.
Yeah, it could be.
And of course, the ring, you said the ring at work. Look at one of the things the ring was doing. It was helping him to rationalize the idea. Oh, there's nothing else I could have done.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's too late for those guys. Yeah. Nothing else we could do.
They're done. I need to get out.
I need to get out
I'm
of
too
here.
important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more important than they are.
Yeah. Yeah. This is definitely the ring doing its best. What's the word? Kind of that temptation, that Sauron kind of temptation.
Temptation, self-deception. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Interesting that the sword splinters when he strikes the arm.
Yeah, I thought that was a little interesting.
This seems to happen a lot
when you kill something that's not
creatures.
Quite alive. Right, right.
Yeah. We'll see more of this later.
Yes, we will. We will see it more than once, as a matter of fact. So, but you're going to take this next little bit here, and then we'll discuss, we'll have a lot to discuss after that, but I'm going to go ahead and have you pick up.
Okay, so I'm picking up just a sentence after where you left off, and so Frodo is fallen over Merry, and Merry's cold. All at once, back into his mind, from which it had disappeared with the first coming of the fog, came the memory of the house down under the hill, and of Tom singing. He remembered the rhyme that Tom had taught them. In a small, desperate voice, he began, "Ho, Tom Bombadil!" And with that name his voice seemed to grow strong. It had a full and lively sound, and the dark chamber echoed as if to drum and trumpet. "Ho, Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadillo! By water, wood, and hill, by the reed and willow, by fire, sun, and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us." There was a sudden deep silence, in which Frodo could hear his heart beating. After a long, slow moment, he heard plain, but far away, as if it was coming down through the ground or through thick walls, an answering voice singing, "Old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow, bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow. None has ever caught him yet, for Tom he is the master. His songs are stronger songs, and his feet are faster."
Well, apparently rather fast indeed, if he was able to make it here.
Got there that quickly, yeah.
Yeah, very quick. I love, though, how just the mere singing of Tom's name gives Frodo
the
Frodo's
strength.
voice. Yeah. Isn't that great?
Yeah, second little but great victory here in this scene. First.
Yeah, you're right.
First triumphing over the ring and striking at the White's hand, but now finding this hope in Tom's song, this strength in Tom's song. This was a big theme in The Hobbit, I feel. Sort of Bilbo finding his courage, finding his inner Took, and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's interesting. We've talked a couple of times before about how Sam has more in common with Bilbo from The Hobbit, in a lot of ways. And so we'll see a lot of those finding your courage moments for Sam later on.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember as many for Frodo later in the book, but there's a couple of really big ones here early in the book. And this is just such a powerful one.
Yeah, there's one right near the end of book 1, as a matter of fact, that we'll get to.
Yes, there is. That's
one of my favorites.
I know that's one of your favorites.
Absolutely. And then we get Tom's song. I mean, so Frodo sings the rhyme, right? The 911 or the 999 rhyme. And then Tom's song.
After what seems like an eternity, Tom comes.
Yeah.
A long, slow moment. Yeah.
911, what's your emergency?
Right. I'm in a barrow? I don't know.
Do you have the address?
No, it's a barrow.
All right. Stand on.
I'm inside it. I can't walk out and look at the address. Yeah. But yeah, we spoke recently about how Tom Bombadil may have been inspired by this character from the Kalevala, this singing wizard of Wainamoinen. And Hammond and Scull...
Also known as Better You Than Me, by the way. I'm just saying.
Fortunately, a lot of good resources online for how to pronounce Wainamoinen.
Good, because any word that has 3 umlauts in it is just one I'm not going to bother with.
Right. Yeah, totally. I don't blame you for that. Yeah, because you're wondering...
I have a hard limit of 2 umlauts.
2 umlauts per word. Yeah. Oh, man.
Sorry.
Limit it to mentions of like Motorhead and Motley Crue, and that's
there you go.
Spinal Tap. But Hammond and Scull shared an essay from David Gay, who says that for both the wizard and Tom, power comes from their command of song and lore rather than from ownership and domination. To have power over something in the mythology of the Kalevala, one must know its origins and be able to sing the appropriate songs and incantations concerning these origins.
Okay, yeah.
Great power in the world of the Kalevala requires great age and great knowledge, and Wainamoinen has both. A large part of his power comes from the fact that, as the oldest of all living things, he saw the creation of things, heard their names, and knows the songs of their origins. Gay finally observes that the same is clearly true of Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, I mean,
I love
he
that.
knows the song for... Oh, I know the song for Old Man
I know
Willow.
the tune for Old Man Willow. That's right. That's exactly
Yeah.
what that means. Yep.
Wow. So I love that it's... You have to know the origins and sing the appropriate songs, and that knowledge comes from great age.
Yeah.
Clearly, Tom being eldest gives him great power.
Yep.
And, of course, great responsibility, because that always
Of course,
comes with
because
great
with
power.
great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, it's just part of the deal.
It reminds me not only of Spider-Man, but also of the Earthsea books by Ursula K. Le Guin. I don't know if you've started reading those yet, but
I've tried to dabble. I just, how it is when you're
it's
working on a podcast. It's hard to find time
for pleasure. I know it's like I make such slow time through those books now, but yeah, anybody who's read those books knows that the whole system of magic in that world is based on knowing the true names of things.
Right.
And it's exactly like that. And that's just so cool. It's a great idea, and it's cool that we see it here and that it's got its roots in this Finnish myth.
Yeah. How did you pronounce it a little different than before?
Kalevala.
Kalevala. So the emphasis is on the first.
Yeah, I think
syllable.
I've always said Kalevala in the past.
Yeah,
and
I had too.
And I've started hearing Kalevala.
Okay.
Which is very subtle. I think it's just, is it the first syllable or the third syllable that is more pronounced, but
right.
I could be wrong. I don't know.
Well, it's not kale vala, that's for sure.
No, it's not.
It has nothing to do with kale in your salad. I just want to make sure we're clear about
the kale vala is Yavanna. And
she is the kale vala.
100 recipes for kale salad.
Oh goodness, and Ale eats none of them.
Right.
So we're not going to read this, but the chamber comes apart a little bit. The light streams in. And I love that the phrase is the plain light of day. I absolutely love that, because there are times when just that plain light is the most amazing thing you could hope for.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially after seeing this pale,
goodness, that pale green light.
I'm still thinking of this corpse light, as Tolkien calls it in Two Towers.
That's a great way of putting it. So there's Tom's head. I love even Tolkien, hat,
popping
feather,
up.
and all.
Hat, feather, and all, popping up. Yep.
What a description. Hey there. What can I do for you?
You rang.
That's great stuff. But then he gets his song on, right? He gets his fight going. He gets his Finrod versus Sauron moment here.
Yeah.
Though I imagine Finrod sang with a little more dignity.
Yeah, probably a lot less dillos.
Yeah, probably a lot less dillos. No armadillos, for that matter. And you mentioned, actually, we weren't going to read any of this verse just because we read so much verse earlier in the chapter, but you wanted to touch on the last couple of lines, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, because we both had some thoughts on this song, and I just thought these last couple of lines were worth highlighting for our listeners.
Yeah.
The song ends with, "Lost and forgotten be, darker than the darkness, where gates stand forever shut till the world is mended." And you said that last line reminded you of...
Yeah, of the banishing of Morgoth. That's right. Now, Hammond and Scull pointed out as well, so I'm just going to read that passage from the Silmarillion. But Morgoth himself, the Valar, thrust through the door of night beyond the walls of the world, into the timeless void. And a guard is set forever on those walls, and Eärendil keeps watch upon the ramparts of the sky. If I'd seen his name in there, I would have let you read it. Because it's
No,
it's
you
an,
wouldn't. No,
you're
you
right.
wouldn't.
I would have felt bad about it, though. How's that? All right, I'm going to.
You just got my attention with it. I said, "Oh, Eärendil."
Okay. Eärendil, yeah.
I'm listening.
There you go. Yes. Yet the lies that Melkor, the mighty and accursed, Morgoth Bauglir, the power of terror and of hate, sowed in the hearts of elves and men, are a seed that does not die and cannot be destroyed, and ever and anon it sprouts anew, and will bear dark fruit even unto the latest days. So that door of night thing, yeah.
Yeah, and that is such a cool catch as to what this banishing really means.
Yeah.
If it has that force, which we
if it has that authority, which I got to say, if anybody does,
there's no reason to believe
outside of Manwë, I would say Tom certainly would be the one.
There's no reason to believe that that these are empty words. I'm sure that that's exactly what's happening here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I love that observation, not just because it mentions Eärendil, but I wanted to add one of my own, which is to notice, and this is where I want to go back to the Song of the White, because there's a real contrast between the last lines of this song and the last lines of the Song of the White. If you remember that, you talked about that very dark vision of the end of the world, a dark vision of a dead world. In the black wind, the stars shall die, and still on gold here let them lie, till the dark Lord lifts his hand over dead sea and withered land. Yeah. The White is basically saying, you're stuck here in my barrow until the end of the world. But it is this dark vision of the end of the world in which evil wins.
Yeah.
Tom, on the other hand, is also banishing the White until the end of the world. It's just as permanent of a curse, if you will, or banishment.
Right.
But his vision of the end of the world is when the world is mended.
Right. Absolutely.
And this is a clear reference to Arda Remade, which is the ultimate triumph of good, when Iluvatar will remake Arda and fix or mend all the errors of Arda marred. And so I just think it's just a fascinating difference in perspective between these two.
Boy, it really
these two
is.
supernatural characters.
They both sort of look to that apocalyptic moment, but the apocalyptic moment is entirely different.
Right, exactly.
As 180 degrees opposite each other.
Right. The White's is all death and destruction and cold and
almost completely nihilistic, sort of. Everything's just going to be burned to nothing.
Yeah.
And Tom is talking about
the world is going to be mended.
Yeah, it's going to become the way it was intended to be all along. No more Melkor element, exactly. No more the whole concept of Morgoth's ring with Arda being
all this corruption that's within Arda itself.
That's part and parcel of everything in the world because of Morgoth.
Right.
My goodness. I'm going to go ahead and pick up shortly after that. Then here, this is where they bring the hobbits out onto the grass. Oh, by the way, so we get the long trailing shriek. Do we get no, we're getting the next thing. Okay, we're getting that in the next paragraph. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself, but that's okay. We do that. Come, friend Frodo, said Tom. Let us get out onto clean grass. You must help me bear them. Together they carried out Merry, Pippin, and Sam. As Frodo left the barrow for the last time, he thought he saw a severed hand wriggling still, like a wounded spider, in a heap of fallen earth. Tom went back in again, and there was a sound of much thumping and stamping. When he came out, he was bearing in his arms a great load of treasure, things of gold, silver, copper, and bronze, many beads and chains and jeweled ornaments. He climbed the green barrow and laid them all on top in the sunshine. There he stood, with his hat in his hand and the wind in his hair, and looked down upon the 3 hobbits that had been laid on their backs upon the grass at the west side of the mound. Raising his right hand, he said in a clear and commanding voice, "Wake now, my merry lads, wake and hear me calling. Warm now be heart and limb, the cold stone is fallen. Dark door is standing wide, dead hand is broken. Night under night is flown, and the gate is open." To Frodo's great joy, the hobbits stirred, stretched their arms, rubbed their eyes, and then suddenly sprang up. They looked about in amazement, first at Frodo, and then at Tom standing large as life on the barrow top above them, and then at themselves in their thin white rags, crowned and belted with pale gold and jingling with trinkets. What in the name of wonder? Began Merry, feeling the golden circlet that had slipped over one eye. Then he stopped, and a shadow came over his face, and he closed his eyes. Of course, I remember, he said. The men of Carn Dûm came on us at night, and we were worsted. Ah, the spear in my heart! He clutched at his breast. No, he said, opening his eyes. What am I saying? I've been dreaming. Where did you get to, Frodo? Wow. We talked about the gate and the idea that this is Tom is sending into the same place.
Shut. Yeah.
But here the gate is open. Can't be the same gate.
Can't be. No.
Absolutely must be a different gate.
Yeah.
I don't know that I spent enough time researching that. That might be something to talk about in our postscript.
That might be, I think that may be something to look into. I don't know what we're going to find on it, but I wonder if this is just, we talked about the possibility that there is some sort of other world that they're entering in when they go into the Barrow. Maybe it's just the gate back from that.
The gate is open to the Barrow.
Yeah. Back to the real world, back to the surface world.
There you go. He's opening the gate from the Barrow back to the real physical world. Okay.
Yeah.
That works. That works to me.
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah. Because the white would then be, the white would be a creature that lurks near the gate, that lures people into its side of the gate.
Right.
Beneath the Barrow. And, then there's kind of a poetic justice to banishing the white out where gates stand forever shut, where it can't do any harm to anybody in the real world anymore. I don't know. That's just spitballing there. I'd be interested to look into it, though.
That's something we'll have to spend some time on. Dead hand is broken. So there's part of it. Plus, we also read it earlier about the severed hand wriggling still like a wounded spider. And then the thumping and stamping. I think
I really wish that didn't happen off camera. I just want to watch Tom
him
stomp the hand into a pile of crypt dust.
I love the idea.
Take that and that
and this for
good
measure.
Do you hear me stomping?
Don't you
Tom
hear me stomping?
Here is crushing you.
Oh goodness, turning that.
Don't you crush my lilies. I'll crush his lilies.
There you go. I'm going to crush your lilies right there. We're going to get more to Merry's vision, but I wanted to make sure we had a chance to touch on that first.
Yeah.
But he brings out the entire load, and we're going to get there in a little bit about what he does with that treasure. But for now, I want to go ahead and touch on that dream, that vivid waking dream. You've got something to start with, right?
This is really powerful. This is another one of those.
Yeah.
This is another one of those moments that when I first read this, I was like, wait, what? It's just one of those things that just hints at this much deeper world.
Yeah.
And
this really does, doesn't it?
Part of why, this story changes so much when you know more of the history. In Appendix A, so this actually is found in Lord of the Rings, but
true. Not everybody reads the appendices.
Not everybody reads the appendices, and I don't think anybody reads them before reading the story for the first time.
Well, I hope not. Spoilers.
Yeah. A little bit of spoiler.
Tale of Years pretty much ruins the whole story.
Pretty much, yeah. So they destroy the ring. Okay, yeah. Appendix A, Roman numeral 1, Little Roman numeral 3, says that after the split of the Northern Kingdom, remember Arnor split into these three splinter kingdoms or whatever.
Arthedain, Rhudaur,
and Cardolan.
Yeah.
And we learned that a great host came out of Angmar in 1409, and crossing the river, entered Cardolan and surrounded Weathertop. The Dunedain were defeated. The tower of Amon Sul was burned and razed, but the Palantir was saved and carried back in retreat to Fornost. Rhudaur was occupied by evil men subject to Angmar, and the Dunedain that remained there were slain or fled west. Cardolan was ravaged. A remnant of the faithful among the Dunedain of Cardolan also held out in Tir Gorthad, that's the Barrow-downs, or took refuge in the forest behind. And then later, when the Great Plague came in 1636, so that's over 200 years later, we learned that it was at this time that an end came of the Dunedain of Cardolan, and evil spirits out of Angmar and Rhudaur entered into the deserted mounds and dwelt there.
That's right. And that's also when we found out that that's when the Witch King himself sent those evil spirits there.
Right. Exactly.
Now, as Hammond and Scull point out, Merry's remarks indicate that in his dreams or trance, he has been experiencing the last hours of the Prince of Cardolan. But the Barrow-wight is not the ghost of this prince, but one of the evil spirits who came to the mounds some 200 years after the prince's death, as an agent of the Witch King of Angmar. Now, Tom Shippey concurs with Hammond and Scull on this and adds a fairly creepy bit, saying that the wight, then, does not come from the people buried in the Barrow, and what it seems to be doing in some way or other is trying to relive an earlier triumph by turning the hobbits once again into the people buried in the Barrow through the influence of the clothes and the treasure, and then once again killing them. Thank you, Tom, for that lovely thought, but I think he's absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
he's reenacting. He's a historical reenactor.
Just another way
I
of
just
saying
do it a
that
couple
is,
weekends every summer. It's just, it's just a hobby.
Every once in a while I let a wight dress me up like a man of Cardolan and kill me,
Right, exactly. Now, I should also mention, by the way, that quote comes from an essay entitled Orcs, Wraiths, Wights, Tolkien's Images of Evil, in a collection of essays called Roots and Branches. I love that collection of essays.
That amazing collection that you have, and I do not, and I need to get it.
There you go.
Yeah, so if you're tracking to that, Merry is not possessed by the wight, as you might think. He's channeling the spirit of the man who belongs in that barrow.
Possessed might be a strong word. Yeah, you're right. He's more like channeling or...
but he's not. But it's not the wight that he's channeling.
You're right.
I guess is what I'm saying.
I knew it.
He's channeling the
prince of Cardolan,
the prince who's buried there, and so this idea that the wights have done this to the hobbits to dress them up so that they can basically kill them again, kind of relive their glory days.
Right.
I mean,
I can just see the wight talking to one of his
chilling.
buddies. Remember way back when?
We used to kill princes all the time back in the day, man.
Yeah, that was awesome. Let's go find somebody we can kind of do that again. Yeah.
I don't know why we sound more like Batman than the wight.
There you go.
Yeah, that's just so creepy, man.
Isn't it? Yeah.
But it makes sense. I mean, it makes more sense than any other reading of that. But I think probably every time that I've read this passage before, I've always thought that, Merry was remembering the wight's memories from life, but no, it's something much more sinister than that.
Much more sinister. Absolutely. So after this section, we're not going to read this bit, but Sam realizes the clothes are gone. Sam's always the practical one. Wait a minute, where are my clothes?
Right.
So, Tom laughs, tells them, look, you're not going to find your clothes.
Those are gone.
Those. I do love one little line that's in this section we're skipping. The horror faded out of their hearts as they looked at him and saw the merry glint in his eyes.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Isn't it?
It's like that feeling when you've, just awakened from a nightmare.
Yeah. And you see the safest thing you can possibly see. A really weird man in a blue hat and yellow boots.
Under the circumstances.
Right. If I see that safe when I wake up, somebody's going to get punched.
Yeah.
But, this is a good thing. No, I love that moment just because it reminds us of the power that Tom has and just the influence that his presence alone has over the hobbits here. It's a really beautiful thing.
Yep. Very cool stuff.
So, but there is a section here that I do want you to read coming up here regarding the clothes and kind of Tom's advice, not so much advice, but maybe reminder about priorities.
Definitely. But Tom shook his head, saying, "You've found yourselves again out of the deep water. Clothes are but little loss if you escape from drowning. Be glad, my merry friends, and let the warm sunlight heat now heart and limb. Cast off these cold rags. Run naked on the grass while Tom goes a-hunting." He sprang away downhill, whistling and calling. Looking down after him, Frodo saw him running away southwards, along the green hollow between their hill and the next, still whistling and crying. "Hey now, come hoy now, whither do you wander? Up, down, near or far, here, there, or yonder. Sharp ears, wise nose, swish tail, and bumpkin. White socks, my little lad, and old fatty lumpkin." So he sang, running fast, tossing up his hat and catching it, until he was hidden by a fold of the ground. But for some time his "Hey now, hoy now" came floating back down the wind, which had shifted round towards the south.
Interesting advice or wisdom there. Hey, you know what? I wouldn't worry about your clothes. You're alive.
You're alive. Yep.
Yeah. I don't know that I like the next bit of advice, though, which is to go running naked.
Just go run naked on the grass.
Not
Rarely is that good advice.
Rarely, very rarely, especially
Certainly
if grass makes you itch in any way.
Yeah. Or if you're at any kind of sporting event.
Yeah. That'll get you arrested right quick.
Yeah.
This is item number 1 on the list of things that will never happen at a live moot. I just want to point that out.
I don't like to say never.
I like to say never on something like this. Yeah. I will. I'll say never a second time. If you do it, you'll never co-host the show with me again. How's that?
I would never do it. I would never do it. I'm just saying I don't pretend to know the future. That's all.
Somebody else might do it, but not us.
Somebody else might do it. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I guess my point was just count it as those things among which we would never participate. Is what
we would absolutely. We would never. No.
No. Terrible thing.
I try not to run naked anywhere. Actually, just
pretty much as a general rule.
Yeah.
This is more of a guideline.
Nope.
Yeah.
Hard rule for me.
Hard rule. I know. No, I know. I can see Tom saying, cast off these cold rags, run naked on the grass. We decline to acquiesce to your request. It means no. Not a chance. He goes a hunting and he's seen some very odd names we haven't heard before.
Yeah.
Sharp Ears, Wise Nose, which might be the pony that turned tail when Frodo tried to run him.
The one that said, I'm not going in there?
Said, no, Frodo,
Yeah.
Swishtail and Bumpkin, White Socks, my little lad, an old fatty lumpkin.
Yeah.
We're going to learn a little bit. I mean, right now we're only surmising that those are the names of the horses, but we'll find that out shortly. So I'm going to read this paragraph and then you'll talk a little bit about those names.
Yep.
And by paragraph, I mean 2. The air was growing very warm again. The hobbits ran about for a while on the grass, as he told them. Then they lay basking in the sun with the delight of those that have been wafted suddenly from bitter winter to a friendly clime, or of people that, after being long ill and bedridden, wake one day to find that they are unexpectedly well, and the day is again full of promise. By the time that Tom returned, they were feeling strong and hungry, and also naked. He reappeared, hat first, over the brow of the hill, and behind him came in an obedient line 6 ponies, their own 5, and 1 more. The last was plainly old fatty Lumpkin. He was larger, stronger, fatter, and older than their own ponies. Mary, to whom the others belonged, had not in fact given them any such names, but they answered to the new names that Tom had given them for the rest of their lives. Tom called them one by one, and they climbed over the brow and stood in a line. Then Tom bowed to the hobbits.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. I love that he introduces them one at a time. I think that's really cool. What a moment.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, now presenting Swishtail. I mean, it's great.
And they've got really nice.
Yeah, descriptive names.
Nice descriptive names. It's not, Rainbow Dash and Twilight Sparkle and
no,
all those that fill my daughter's room.
Yeah.
But
so glad my daughter knows nothing of those.
I should go next time my daughter brings out her ponies. She's got 6 of them.
Of course, I should
just rename them. These things, no, honey, that's not Pinkie Pie. That's Wise Nose.
The question is, though, will they answer to the new names that Sean had given them for the rest of their lives?
If her plastic My Little Ponies answer to any name, I will be very scared.
Run away.
Leave.
Yeah,
leave now.
Very, very quickly. We don't like
I'm
those
waiting
names,
for
Sean. Yeah, exactly. Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
I also thought it was interesting we find out that, and I think we might have learned this earlier, but that these ponies weren't just belonging to the property that they had at Crick Hollow or something along those lines. These were Mary's personal ponies.
Yeah.
And in a day like that, these are the equivalent of tools or cars. I mean, this would be like Mary.
These would have been valuable things if they'd been lost. These were valuable possessions for sure.
Their individual Porsches that they were driving on their journey had all belonged to Mary. And Tom brings an SUV.
Yeah.
It's just interesting.
And yet Mary had not named them, or at least had not
No.
named them those things. And I love this. There's an observation by Hammond and Scull about how Tom gives these ponies these names that do highlight these physical features or special abilities. And
Right.
And again, most of them are self-explanatory. Sharp ears,
Right.
wise nose. I don't know how he knew its nose was wise, but probably, like you said, it's the one that
Yeah.
ran away.
Perception,
Swishtail.
right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
White
Yeah.
socks. In the nomenclature, Tolkien has a little bit on lumpkin. He says basically translators should translate that into whatever it translates to in their own language, explaining that the kin is, of course, a diminutive suffix. So Fatty Lumpkin's last name means something like little lump. Although Hammond and Scull point
I would change
I know,
my
right?
name.
It's not terribly flattering. Hammond and Scull point out
come here,
that-
little lump.
Oh, I'm a little lump. Sounds like something you'd call your baby or something.
I don't know. Not if you love him.
People always have weird names for their
That's
baby,
true,
like
that's
Peanut
true.
and Pickle and
Yeah.
Lump. But
I've never heard lump, but okay.
it's going to get worse because Hammond and Scull point out that
Yes, it does.
lump in this case may not mean, like a lump of putty, a compact mass of no definite shape. It might actually mean sort of the colloquial meaning of a lump is a big or fat or stupid person or animal.
Mm.
So it's not a flattering name,
No, it isn't.
probably. As for bumpkin, it's much the same. Hammond and
Yeah,
Scull
yeah.
quote the concise Oxford English Dictionary, which says that it possibly derives from a Middle Dutch word, bomkin, which means little barrel, denoting a
Okay.
dumpy person.
Oh,
So,
a dumpy
yeah.
person. Nice.
Yeah. So Tom gives them names, but they're not exactly dignified.
No, I'm sure White Sox is kind of like, thank goodness I dodged that one.
Right? I know.
I mean, just, whoa. This is as bad as the
Sharp
elves'
ears
names
got
for
off pretty
men.
light. I mean,
Yeah.
that one comes close to being a compliment. And
Yeah,
wise nose.
Yeah, Wise Nose certainly is the kindest one of all. But oh my goodness! Well, no matter whether they're flattering or not, the ponies answer to these names for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, they do. And that tells us, either that Tom had a profound effect on them or, kind of going back to that idea of him knowing the tune for Old Man Willow. Maybe he had some insight into their true natures that, a mere hobbit couldn't have, Maybe both. I don't know.
Yeah, a little bit of both, certainly. So we're not going to read the next little bit, but thankfully the hobbits freaking put some clothes on.
Yeah.
And Tom
And their
basically tells them
punishment
where
for
they were.
running around naked is that they now have to sweat in their winter clothes.
Yeah, seriously. And itch, because this is
Itch.
grass.
Yeah, right. Yep.
So Tom explains where the ponies went, which is basically anywhere but where you were going, you dumb, stupid hobbits.
What is wrong with you people?
They sniff danger right ahead, which you walk right into, you dummies. I mean, that's the unspoken little criticism there.
Yep.
So he explains also about Fatty, by the way. And then he tells them he's going to ride with them to the road. That's where you're going to pick up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Fatty is thinking, "You're going to ride me? Come on, man! Don't
You do that every so often, and I don't like it, Tom. You're not
I
getting any
never
smaller.
have liked it, Tom.
You're not getting any smaller.
He certainly isn't. Okay.
Stomping around like a cow, running, charging to the rushes.
Yes, indeed. All right. But now, my jolly lumpkin, old Tom's going to ride. Hey, he's coming with you just to set you on the road, so he needs a pony. For you cannot easily talk to hobbits that are riding when you're on your own legs trying to trot beside them." The hobbits were delighted to hear this and thanked Tom many times. But he laughed and said that they were so good at losing themselves that he would not feel happy till he had seen them safe over the borders of his land.
Man. That's great.
"I've got things to do," he said, "my making and my singing, my talking and my walking, and my watching of the country. Tom can't be always near to open doors and willow cracks. Tom has his house to mind, and Goldberry is waiting."
There you go. I love that. It really reminds them of his priorities, which are, of course, his home and Goldberry.
But he did tell them to call if they needed help.
Well, yeah, you're welcome to call if you need help, but, clearly you're so incompetent that I'm going to have to lead you to the borders of my land.
It's probably just better for all of us if I just see you to the edge of the
I don't want to
my
go
land
home and
here.
have to come back again in 10 minutes. So I'm just going to
Right.
ride with you, really. It's
Yeah.
not a big deal. Fine. Just go. Let's go. And even though obviously his priorities are his house and Goldberry, I wanted to talk about something we read kind of earlier at the list of things that he's got to do. about his making and his singing.
Yeah.
The word making really feels significant. Now, I don't think he's talking about, basket weaving or macrame. I think this is a word. No, this is a word that some people point to when they want to allege that Tom Bombadil is Eru. He's making, therefore he's a maker, so he must be the maker. Now, that doesn't really follow. That's not necessarily a logical conclusion. And certainly if it weren't for what Tolkien said in his own letters, we talked about this recently, and I think it was episode 115. We cited both 153 and 181 to make it really evident that Tolkien, explaining that there's no way that Tom could have been Eru because there is no embodiment of the one in Arda,
right?
Specifically.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, I kind of feel like this reference to making proves the opposite. Not only does it not prove that Tom is Iluvatar, I think it proves that he is not. And I'll show you how I get there, or I'll tell you how I get there, rather. He mentions making alongside his singing. And this reminds me that the Greek word for maker is poietes, which is the origin of our word poet.
Right.
A poet in Greek is literally a maker. There are a couple of more nouns that are related to this word that mean making in Greek. One of them is poiesis, and that's a word you tend to find in academic contexts and things for any creative production, any work of art.
Okay.
But another word from the same root, or I should probably say a word suffix that means making, is poieia, as in mythopoeia or mythopoeia. Now, longtime listeners know we've talked about mythopoeia before, and the title does just mean myth making. That's the poem by Tolkien that most clearly lays out his ideas about subcreation, right?
Yeah.
And he talks about subcreation as a microcosm of the original creation by God.
Right.
There is that line in there, we make still by the law in which we're made.
Absolutely.
I think Tom Bombadil being called a maker here, or referring to his making here, I think he's talking about subcreating here. I think this is a hint that he is most certainly not the creator, the maker, but a subcreator. And I think maybe, I don't know, he might be the purest example of a subcreator in Middle-earth, because unlike so many other subcreators that we see, he makes without any thought of possession.
Yeah.
We've talked about the fact that there's no desire to possess the land or anything like that. He just
that
makes.
Would be such a burden, as Goldberry says.
That would be such a burden, as Goldberry says. And so he just goes around making. And so I think Tolkien was very aware of his own ideas about subcreation, and obviously using words like pia and mythopoeia. I think he was very aware of what he was doing here. And I think
I think so.
I think that we need to see Tom as a subcreator. And I do want to revisit that a little bit in the next episode, when we finally start coming to some conclusions about, or maybe coming to some conclusions, or at least talking more
at least
about
coming
what
to our
exactly
conclusions.
He is. Yeah,
exactly. And that's going to be great. But that will do it for tonight's chapter discussion. But definitely be sure to join us again next week when we open the treasure and roll for our loot.
Yes, indeed. But before we reach into Barlaman's bag, we want to remind you about the fellowship of the podcast. If you've been listening recently, you've heard us talk about how close we were to our next goal of setting up a Discord server. Well, it turns out that our listeners have long anticipated our private humiliation, and we should have that set up by the time this airs.
I think all it takes is one look at our Facebook page, and it's pretty clear. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But to keep that embarrassment amongst friends, that Discord server is going to be limited to our patrons at the Gift of Gondor level or higher. So if you are interested in listening in live during an episode recording and hearing all the stuff that doesn't even make our blooper reel, well, be sure to visit patreon.com/prancingponypod. Now, when you sign up, you'll also get a bunch of other goodies. You'll get PPP swag. You'll get access to some very cool exclusive content, all sorts of good stuff. And check out our next goal of setting up a monthly live hangout with us on Discord, a chance to chat with a couple of your, hopefully favorite podcast hosts.
Indeed. And if you're looking for a new Tolkien book, check out the official library pages at our website, theprancingponypodcast.com. We've put together a set of links for our listeners to all the books we've ever mentioned on the show, Tolkien or otherwise. And if you wouldn't mind posting a review on iTunes, we'd really be grateful for that. Folks, I know I say this at the end of every show, but it really is true. Those iTunes reviews increase our visibility. That means more new listeners finding us, more great questions coming in for Barliman, more discussion on social media, and generally just a more vibrant Tolkien community.
Absolutely. And we should also have our next t-shirts available for sale by the time this episode airs. Now, at the moment, we're still working on which designs and colors will be available this time around, but be sure to check out our Facebook page, that's at Prancing Pony Pod, for more details. Now, speaking of social media, it's also helpful if you share us there. So on Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, wherever. If there are Tolkien fans there, share us there.
Please.
Now, with that, it's time to see what old Barliman has in the mailbag for us. Sean?
Well, earlier in the episode, when poor Merry found himself a victim of the Barrow-wight's bizarre roleplay, we
kind
talked
of
about the
cosplay,
wars.
really, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
is
really.
it cosplay when you force somebody else to wear the costume?
That's a good question.
I mean, that might not be cosplay anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like forced LARPing.
Forced cosplay.
Extreme
forced
LARPing.
Extreme LARPing. Or in this case, DARP, because, he's not going to be live. That was the whole idea.
Well done. I like that. Yeah, DARPing. So we talked about the wars between Angmar and the kingdoms of the Dunedain. Well, David R. in Christchurch, New Zealand, raised some questions about this, particularly in regards to Sauron's, let's say, lack of knowledge about the hobbits being in the area. David wrote to us once before the end of the year to say, if the Lord of the Nazgul was the Witch King of Angmar, why didn't Sauron know about the Shire? And then a few weeks later, David wrote to us again with a little bit more, saying, I still find it difficult to believe Sauron didn't know about the Shire. And he gave a number of reasons.
Sure.
I will, kind of paraphrase a little bit here, but, basically including things like, Eriador is not that big of a region for something the size of the Shire to go unnoticed.
Okay.
And it is on the main road through the region.
Right.
Sauron had spies that included birds and wild animals.
Yeah.
Sauron knew about Eregion, obviously.
Yeah.
We know that there were orc attacks on the Shire, when golf was invented, right?
Yep.
And, lots of other people and cultures had at least some knowledge of hobbits. Saruman, the Rohirrim, the Gondorians all had some knowledge. A lot of it is fragmentary, but they at least had heard of hobbits. And, the fact that the Rangers' protection of the Shire should have shown that there was, something there to protect. So David's question is, what gives?
Well, that is a fair question. I'm not sure we can come up with a perfect answer. But I do think some of the factors he's come up with might have easy answers. So I'll take those and leave the hard ones for you.
Oh, thank you.
For example, the Shire may not have been unnoticed in Eriador, but it could certainly be unlocated if all of Sauron's spies were, let's say, slain by the Rangers before they could come back with information. Sauron would know there was something there to protect, but he wouldn't necessarily know exactly where in the region it was. He also mentions those orc attacks. We know that the orcs attacked the Shire directly at the Battle of the Greenfields when Banderbus invented golf, but that was long before Sauron had regained his power in Dol Guldur. There's nothing that suggests that those orcs were under direct orders from Sauron. In fact, I'd even argue that they couldn't have been because Sauron was not in any condition to be giving orders at that point. He hadn't regained any form. It was just a typical orc raid. It's not as though, orcs are sitting around doing needlework, waiting for Sauron to tell them to raid a village.
Right. When they're bored, they're raiding. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. It's not like like I said, they're not watching the Hallmark Channel. You know what I mean?
Not even orcs watch the Hallmark Channel.
No, that's true. Those 10-minute commercial breaks drive them crazy. Yeah. So no information was going to get back to Sauron from an orc raid that was just an orc raid because they're orcs. And you mentioned all those people, the Saruman and the Rohirrim and the folks at Gondor. They all knew about or had some sort of memory of hobbits. And so did Sauron. He, just like those, thought they weren't worth his attention. He never paid attention to them until he realized that he needed to. And, once he realized that they were worth his attention, he sent the ringwraiths to the Anduin because that's the last place he knew they'd been. Yeah,
I think you're right. And I think, not worth his attention, I think that goes a long way towards explaining why Sauron didn't pick up on the many clues that were available.
Yeah.
Yes, the Shire was right there in Eriador, hiding in plain sight. But still, he wouldn't have no reason to pay attention to it until, frankly, it was too late. I think of all the possible reasons why he should have known, I think David's original email has the most compelling one. The fact that the Witch King of Angmar was right there.
Yeah.
He went to war against Arthedain in Third Age 1974. that would have been 373 years after the Shire had been founded.
And it would have been at the height of the bell-bottom craze, 1974.
Totally, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Disco wasn't quite there yet. Punk really wasn't there yet. It was
certainly not.
Yeah. But
sorry,
really,
that's fourth age.
Really, the golden age of prog rock at that time. Really,
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
but no. So the Shire had been there for 373 years. Now, I will point out that even though 373 years might seem like a long time to us,
yeah, like a really, really long time.
Right, exactly. In a pre-modern civilization, I don't think that that's really that much time for the Shire to have grown to the point where anyone really noticed it, especially considering how isolationist hobbits tend to be.
True.
They had been there for that time, but they're not really.
They're not on the world stage, right? They're not. Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah, they're not on the world stage, as you say. They're just kind of doing their own thing and probably growing much slower than we think in that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And considering that the Witch King's attention was really on the Dunedain right on his doorstep, not the halflings in this little backwater province across the Brandywine,
True.
I don't think it's that surprising that they escaped his notice for as long as they did.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, especially when the prologue tells us that the hobbits were ruled by their own chieftains and meddled not at all with events in the world outside. Now, the next line might be a cause for confusion for some of us, because it does actually tell us they sent archers to fight against Angmar. It says, to the last battle at Fornost with the Witch Lord of Angmar, they sent some bowmen to the aid of the king, or so they maintained, though no tales of men recorded.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if no tales of men recorded, it's probably unlikely that any tales of the Witch King recorded it either.
That's if he even bothered having anybody take notes.
Right.
But they were archers.
Here, Gorbag, make sure you chronicle this entire thing. We gotta keep records of this.
It's for posterity. And of course, these hobbits were archers. They were probably standing near the back shooting arrows from a distance. It's not like they were charging the Angmar ranks right in front of the Witch King, shouting, "For the Shire!"
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think even if they had been up in the front lines, or if they made their way to the front lines somehow, there's just no reason to believe that
somehow the front lines were driven way, way back, and the hobbits didn't
somehow
move.
The front lines disappeared, and the archers became the front line.
Yeah, that's a bad moment for the archers.
That is. But there's just no reason to believe that the forces of Angmar had ever seen anything like them before, or had any idea where they came from.
Oh, cute. They're bringing their children to battle. How nice is that?
They're so adorable. They've given their kids bows.
Kill him.
But I think all this makes sense when you consider, again, that the bad guys didn't know that the hobbits were worth paying attention to.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it all goes back to that. And I think that if they had any idea that these little guys were going to spell their doom, yeah, they would have taken notice for sure.
Hey, hobbits, how do you spell doom? All right.
U.S.
Yeah. Well, we've got time for one more question, I think, from the mailbag. It's from Greg in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and his 9-year-old son, Rex, who Greg says is working his way into becoming a full-blown Tolkien fan. He asks, is there a best or just better way to approach the world of Middle-earth? And what role do all these support materials, video games, podcasts, movies, play here? Are we past the time when younger folks will start with the books or ever read them at all? Or even the movies with the Amazon show looming? He goes on to say, my first exposure to the work came from the 1970s animated films. Imperfect though they are, they started me on the path. I read The Hobbit and Unfinished Tales and made a few attempts at The Lord of the Rings, finally moving all the way through them in my early 20s. That was my path, and years later the Jackson movies served to bring the stories back to the forefront of people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
He says, though, that Rex, on the other hand, had a different path. I read him The Hobbit when he was around 6. He did enjoy it, but did not fully embrace it. His next exposure was through the Lego Lord of the Rings video game. We then read The Hobbit together again. He then read it on its own, then began playing the Hobbit video game, and is now working through the Lord of the Rings books on his own. He's a very strong reader, but I wonder if the books would captivate him in the same way without having the introduction that came from the video games. We have just this weekend watched the first Jackson movie. And then I just have to add this. Greg includes this, and it is a real treat. So thank you, Greg. He says, the Prancing Pony podcast has been no small part of all of this. We timed our listening of the episodes on The Hobbit to coincide with his reading. He didn't want to get ahead. Thank you so much for the effort and enthusiasm you bring to the show each week. I hope it pleases you to know that the podcast is now a formative and important part of at least one new fan's understanding of being a fan of Tolkien. Oh,
wow.
That's heartwarming.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
That is awesome. And it certainly does please us.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And Rex, welcome to the world of Tolkien. We're really glad to help you along on your path. And I hope that these will just be the first steps for you in a long road of wonder and enjoyment, as much as we've
road that goes ever on and on, as a matter of fact.
Indeed, yeah.
So getting to Greg's question, is there a best or maybe a more effective or a better way to approach the entirety of the world of Middle-earth? I mean, obviously, we're going to say read the books, right? But what about all this other media?
Well, obviously, a good Tolkien podcast is essential.
Oh, of course. But, I can think of at least two.
Yeah. But no, the truth is, I don't, he talked about video games a lot. To be honest, I don't really keep up with games enough to know how popular or how good some of the Middle-earth video games that are out now are. I mean, honestly, dude, the last Middle-earth video games I remember playing, this would have been like on my Packard Bell 386 in high school. There was one called War in Middle-earth. I think that came out in 1988. And another one called Riders of Rohan, which I think was 91. Yeah. And by the way, if anybody out there remembers playing those games, please email me and let's talk, because I love those games so much. The 16 color graphics.
16 color. Fantastic. Yeah. VGA, man. Yep. No, 16 color. That was only EGA, wasn't it?
That was EGA, yeah.
Yeah. VGA was 256. You're right.
Right. But
boy.
So yeah, I'm not totally up on the video games, but Alan, I mean, you've played like Lord of the Rings Online, and you've played some of the Shadow of War, Shadow of Mordor, right?
I have. I mean, indeed, my other nerd hobby for many years at least, I have to admit, almost none at all lately, has been video games. I've played a bunch of
podcast will do that to you.
A podcast will certainly do that to you, and so will young children. It's not just the podcast, but when the kids came along, the time to play video games has been limited. So it's more like, hey, I've got 20 minutes, I'll play a driving game or something. I don't get to sit down for
anything
hours
that's like longer that you really need to like stick
long
with
sessions. I can't. I just don't get a chance to. I think I'm still playing Skyrim, 7 years after it came out. I still haven't finished it.
Honestly, my wife and I are still playing Diablo 3 for
there you go.
I don't know how many. We've bought it on like 4 or 5 different platforms now.
Yeah.
Just because it's what we know and it's what we like. So
might as well. If it's the only game you've got, then make it a good one.
Yep.
But I have played a bunch of those Middle-earth based games going back. I think I remember a couple of those, one or two of the ones you mentioned, but going back at least to Interplay's 1990, The Lord of the Rings Volume 1, up through Electronic Arts' Battle for Middle-earth, Snowblind's War in the North, and not to mention one of my favorites, The Lord of the Rings: The Third Age, which came out on the original Xbox, the one that was about the size of a small car, back in 2004. And of course, yes, The Lord of the Rings Online, or LOTRO, and the more recent orc-killing simulators called Shadow of Fill in the Blank. The only one or Middle-earth Assassin's Creed really is kind of what those games are. But the only one I'd say is really worth the time if you care about the lore is LOTRO. We talked about it at length with Michael Drought. He was involved, of course, in some of the background material, some of the Old English, the Rohirric material. Yeah. And I have to say that the team there does a really faithful job, at least as much as can be in the medium, of being true to the established Middle-earth lore. That cannot be said for the Shadow games. They might be fun. They're fun running around and finding clever ways to kill orcs and stuff. But don't think for a minute they represent Middle-earth, because the lore is so far gone as to be, honestly, to me, it's honestly insulting to the lore.
The little bit I know of those games, I mean, I've never played them, but I've read some of the articles about some of the stuff they've done to the lore.
It's absurd. I mean, it goes beyond. Yeah. You think Keely and Tariel is kind of like, anti-canon. That's nothing. They are Arwen and Aragorn in comparison to some of the junk that they come up with in these games. I mean, seriously, it is absurd.
I've heard some of the stuff they've come up with.
Isildur becoming one of the ring wraiths, becoming one of the 9. Yeah. Isildur.
Yeah. That's
Shelob in the form of some, sexy, slinky woman.
Yes,
that's crazy.
That's the article I remember reading. I was like, they did what with Shelob now? Yeah.
It's nuts. It's a really, I mean, okay, I get it. It's an adaptation, but it's not a recognizable adaptation. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. But I have heard people say that they're fun games,
As a game, just from a gaming experience. Yeah. I mean, they're a grind. They're a ton of grind. But they're really good graphics. If you have a good graphic card, they're clever and fun. They have great music. But it's not a lore thing. I would say LOTRO really certainly the only current game that is relatively faithful.
Yeah.
And
that fits
yeah.
with everything that I've heard. And again, it's not a world that I'm terribly up on anymore, but
No.
yeah, I've definitely heard everything you're saying about them. And because I'm not really that plugged into that world, one thing I don't know is, do those games appeal primarily to gamers who already know Tolkien's world, or are people discovering Middle-earth through the games? I mean, I have to think that at this point, like most players getting into those games must at least know the Peter Jackson movies, right?
Yeah. It's almost impossible not to know those movies. I mean,
yeah, it's true.
The shadow
if you're too young to watch those movies, you're probably too young to play those games.
Oh, most
right?
certainly. Yeah. Especially those shadow games are pretty violent, but they're very heavily inspired by Jackson's vision of the world.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
So I think, anybody playing those is certainly at least familiar with the films. I'm sure there's a little bit of both. There are people who discover Tolkien's world through the games and then go to the books. And there are people who have read the books and decide they want to immerse themselves in the world. I tend to think the people who've read the books would immerse themselves more into Lotro, but that's just me.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I honestly think we're already at the point where the Peter Jackson movies are many people's first entry into the world.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I think just because, probably a lot of people are watching those movies at a slightly younger age than they're reading the books. I don't know.
Well, TNT shows it something like 18 times a month these days. So, I'm pretty sure.
And if it's the Lord of the Rings movies, I'll put it on every time it's on. Pretty much. But, as Greg said, I mean, people getting introduced to the books through the movies is nothing new. Even in the 1970s, people were discovering the books through, Rankin and Bass and Ralph Bakshi's cartoon.
That's how I discovered it. Remember, my first copy of The Hobbit was the Rankin and Bass.
Was the Rankin and Bass illustrated one, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so is there a better way or a best way to discover Tolkien's world? I'm probably biased. I discovered the books first. And I think regardless of whichever one you discover first, I think you can't really enter Tolkien's world unless you've read Tolkien's books.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies. I like the Rankin and Bass Hobbit. I have made no attempt to hide my opinion of Jackson's Hobbit movies or Bakshi's Lord of the Rings movies. I'm not really a fan of those.
No.
But if they lead people to the books, I think that's great.
Absolutely.
And if the Amazon series is good, I'll be happy. If it ends up not being my cup of tea, but it gets a new generation of people interested in the books, then I'll be happy about that.
Yeah. I mean, I am thrilled to have new readers come aboard, no matter how they've come into the tale. But it's new readers that I want to see, not just new fans. I mean, you can love the other adaptations all you want. I agree. But let them lead you to Tolkien's Middle-earth, the real Middle-earth. Now, look, I know that can sound haughty, maybe even a little elitist, but like you said, you can't really enter Tolkien's world until you've actually read Tolkien, not Jackson, not Bakshi, not Amazon, none of those. You've got to read Tolkien to really understand Tolkien's world. But I am thrilled when somebody who might never have even opened the books in the first place decides to go ahead and do that because they love the films first, even if they were terrible films like the Hobbit trilogy. Did I just say that out loud, that they were terrible? I did, didn't I?
Again.
Yeah, sorry. Okay.
No, and I'm with you. I mean, I think, look, I've got lots of friends and family members who all they know is the movies, all they're interested in the movie is the movies. And, that's fine. I do wish they would read the books. I'm not going to say anybody is wrong not to read the books, but I do think anybody who's a fan of the story should at least try to read the books.
Right.
You might be surprised how approachable they are, how much fun they are. And again, if you haven't read the books, you don't know Tolkien's world. You know somebody else's version of Tolkien's world.
Exactly. You don't know Middle-earth.
In
Jackson's
more or less
Middle-earth.
places, but right, exactly. And just for me, I personally fell in love with Tolkien's world, and I want others to fall in love with it as well. I mean, it's after all one of the reasons we do this show.
That really is, isn't it? Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So, hey, however anybody comes to Tolkien's world, I always love hearing that somebody is discovering these works for the first time. And so I really do love hearing that you've shared the Prancing Pony podcast with your son, Greg. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And Rex, again, thank you for letting us help you find your way through Middle-earth. And either one of you, please email us anytime you'd like. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. And that is flat out
again, I should say, we'd love to hear from you again. You know what I meant.
I did. Agreed. That really is flat out one of the best things we've ever had the privilege of hearing.
Yeah.
To know that we've helped you introduce your son to Tolkien, and that's a real privilege. That's the kind of thing that keeps us going when the process gets hard, and sometimes it really does. But knowing what a help we can be to folks is a real encouragement.
Yeah,
so
it really is.
Well, on that note, it does wrap it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. But be sure to join us again next week when Tom's history lesson conjures up visions of tall, grim men.
Well, that certainly doesn't describe us, does it?
But no, folks, it doesn't.
Thanks again for listening, and thank you for making our common room on Facebook such a fun place to spend time. We want all of you to be a part of this conversation, and it does not stop when the episode ends. See the comments, the questions, the corrections, and more on Facebook at The Prancing Pony Podcast, on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod, and on Instagram at Prancing Pony Pod.
Tall, grim men. We're just short, silly men.
We are short, silly men.
1 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yep.
Well, as always, we also want to issue a very, very special thank you to our patrons at the Kierdance contribution tier. That's DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Emily in Texas, and Chad in Texas. Thank you very much.
Make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe to the show through iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, your stories of running naked on the grass. Stories only, please. No pictures. To Bartleman at theprancingponypodcast.com. Yeah, if it's anything other than a text or a doc file, I'm not opening it.
Nope.
We'll try to get those stories into our next show. Well, however long we've had, it is still far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners, even if it is far more time than we'd like to spend among people running naked on the grass. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.